Okay, awesome. Thank you, Carly, for setting that up. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We do have quite a bit of information to cover today, and so we will just be diving right in. So thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jennifer Bingham, and I am the Vice President of Operations here at MemoryFox. As someone who previously worked in the nonprofit space, I am so excited to discuss today's topic with you because I know firsthand how incredibly important it is to have volunteers and how they support your nonprofit mission. And I know that you guys, our guests, have a lot of information to share with us today, so let's dive right in. First, I would like to introduce Carly Euler. Carly is the marketing manager here at MemoryFox, and she, like me, comes from the nonprofit space previously. She has previously held positions at the Wiley Network, the Breast Cancer Coalition, as well as Coda Support Foundation. And in these roles, she specialized in marketing, communications, special events, and fundraising. Carly is also the creator of our 2023 Ethical Storytelling Report, and we're excited to have you, Carly. Welcome.
Hello, thanks everybody for coming.
And now I'd also like to introduce our next guest, Jennifer Bennett. Jennifer is the Director of Education and Training at VolunteerMatch. Jennifer leads VolunteerMatch's Learning Center, and she also designs tools, trainings, and resources to help VolunteerMatch's community of nonprofits better recruit and engage volunteers. She also co-hosts the Time and Talent podcast with Toby Johnson from Volunteer Pro, which finished its fourth season in December of 2022. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm excited to be here.
We are so excited to have you both here. And then just a quick reminder that this session is being recorded today, and you all will receive a copy within 24 hours via email. And as another reminder, today's agenda will be broken into 3 parts. First, Carly is going to explore the power of storytelling with you, including how to collect great stories and specifically volunteer stories from your community. Next, Jennifer will explore the best ways to use these collected stories to meet and exceed your volunteer recruitment and retention goals. And lastly, we'll wrap up with a Q&A session. So thank you all in advance for those really thoughtful submissions during registration. We have a ton of great questions for our guests, so let's dive right in. Carly, take it away.
Okay, I am so excited to go first here today. I was just telling both of the Jennifers before I hopped on that I just love this content, so I'm really thrilled to be sharing it with you all today. Okay, I think my screen should be showing here.
Yep.
Wonderful. All right, well, to kick off this session, we always like to start with this question, which is, if someone asks, what is your mission, can you show them? And the thing about this question is, I bet it's very likely that you are able to share your mission by word and also by writing it, right? You probably know your mission by the back, like the back of your hand. But do you have the photos and the videos that you need and able to actually convey your mission? And that's something we're going to chat about today, along with really just why storytelling is so important in general. There's been so much research that's come out lately that talks about how important storytelling is, and I'm just going to share a few stats with you. So first, over at Classy, they actually did a study that found that fundraising campaigns that incorporate video receive 114% more funding than those that don't. So that's not 10%, that's not even 50%, that's 114 more percent. I mean, that's something that you really just can't ignore. Second, this study has been replicated many, many times, but specifically the Stanford Graduate School of Business found that stories are just more memorable. In fact, they're up to 22 times more memorable than just facts alone. And third, at this point, it's really just what people are looking for. Sprout Social found that 62% of users said that they've become more interested in a product or a brand after seeing it in a short form video. So a short form video, those are the videos that you see on Instagram Reels. Those are the videos you see on TikTok. And we all know that those videos are really exploding. People are so engaged in those lately, especially as our attention spans continue to shorten. And I will just say, if you are somebody who is nervous about getting started telling stories through video or even just through other types of visuals, I want to just remind you that an infographic has never gone viral, and I'm assuming it never will. So let's just all get on board with video story or with storytelling in general. I also do want to say that I recognize that it is kind of ironic for me to talk about storytelling in the form of statistics. So instead, I actually want to go ahead and share the story of one of our friends at Kids Health Connections. And I'm going to let this video speak for itself. Let me know if you can hear this, because I'm not certain if I turned on my sharing audio. So let me see here.
Can't hear it.
Okay, so you couldn't hear that?
Yeah, the volume's a little bit low, Carly.
Oh, that's interesting. The volume is low. Okay. Let me just reshare 1 second. See if I can get that fixed. Oh, not that one. To share with my audio, that one there. All right, let's do it again. This should work perfectly this time. Go back 1 slide. And here, and okay, great. Without further ado, now you all are probably wondering what was going on in this video. I can't wait to share.
I love the mentors, and I love that they help me and they motivate me and push me up when I'm feeling down and I stop or I'm say I can't do it. They always say I can't, but I always say I can't, but they always say I can do it. Never say you can't. So I love that they motivate me all the time, and we're strong, fit kids.
Okay, so I want to say I've probably seen this video at least 100 times at this point. If everyone would take a second, drop in the chat what you're feeling after watching this video. I know for me, you can see it on my face. It always makes me smile. It makes me really interested to learn more about this program, and it makes me really think, wow, this kid's really enjoying this program, and I want to support that program. Okay, so as Jen mentioned, I know that you all submitted great questions during the registration process, and I want to let you know, I read through all those questions, I sorted through all those questions, and I am ready to answer them. So we obviously have the Q&A coming up later, but in this presentation, the first question I want to address is from Hannah. She said, how do you create videos and marketing materials as a nonprofit with a limited budget? Well, I'm really glad you asked, because we actually have just a very simple 3-step strategy that we recommend to our customers. It's completely free. It's just 3 steps. And this is just a framework that we put together. And the first step is to first just consider your outputs. So when you're thinking about how best to find stories that are going to create those great materials for you to share later, the first step is finding the stories, right? So the number one thing you want to do is think about your outputs. When you're considering your outputs, the questions you want to ask are, what goals am I trying to reach through storytelling? And what do I want to create with my content? So this is before you even go talk to anybody. You really want to start thinking about, what is the final result going to look like? What are my goals here? Once you've considered your outputs, it's time for you to think about the inputs that will inform those outputs. So the questions you want to ask yourself: what stories help me reach my goals? And what types of content help me tell my story? And then you might think that once you understand who you want to ask your question from, who the input is going to be, that you might be done. But we actually want you to take it 1 step further and think about your calls to action. So step 3, ask yourself, what questions will help me collect the stories I'm looking for? What prompts inspire my community to tell their story? So we're going to talk a little bit more later about great storytelling questions for volunteers specifically, because we really believe that when you ask somebody a really great question, that's what's actually going to lead to a really great answer. So like I said, it's just step 1, outputs, step 2, inputs, step 3, calls to action. And this is a framework that our friends at Kids Health Connections actually used, which helped them collect this great story. So when you think about when they thought about their outputs, their inputs, and their calls to action, this is kind of how it ended up looking for them. And just in the interest of time, I do have a worksheet that I will link in the chat after I am done, but it does include this exact example, or you're welcome to take a screenshot if that's more helpful for you. But yeah, just to reiterate, it really is so simple, just 3-step process. Okay, my next question that I want to address comes from Felicia. She said, what are some prompts that other nonprofits have used to gather great testimonials? So right off the bat, I've got 8 conversation starters that spark volunteer stories. These are ones that we together as a team have put together. Some of my favorites here on the list would be number 2, which is what's the most rewarding part about volunteering. I just think that a lot of times there are so many reasons why people volunteer for your organization, and unless you ask them, you're not really going to know how different those might be. I also love number 8, which is how does our organization make our community a better place? And I think that that's a really great conversation starter, because not only are your volunteers the exact right person to ask that question to, because they're seeing the work in action, they're doing the boots on the ground work, but this also, the outputs that you're going to get from that can be used in so many ways. I can see this question sparking a story that would be great for an appeal or great for your next email campaign. So these are just some volunteer specific prompts that you can use. But in terms of actual customers that we have that have great volunteer stories, Engage Arkansas is one of our pretty brand new customer to us, but they're already seeing great success with volunteer stories. So they actually just use a very simple prompt, which is simple yet targeted, and that is, in your own words, what does service mean to you? And I love this prompt because it is very easy for your volunteer to simply respond, right? You can go ahead and know that the beginning of your sentence is, well, to me, service means, and you go ahead and answer. This makes it so easy for volunteers to get into the right space and try to get that story that you're really looking for. The thing that I love about how Engage Arkansas does this is they have a consistent recognition in place. So they actually post a weekly Member Monday, and it's featured on their Facebook and Instagram. And when you commit to doing something regularly, that is going to encourage others not only just to share their story, but it's really just going to remind them, oh, I did want to share that story. I'm going to get back and do that. We also have been working with the Arbor Day Foundation for quite some time now, and they are wildly successful at collecting content from all of their tree planting events. I believe that their key to success is that they are hyper organized, and they just work really hard to make sure that those stories are all organized in a way that they actually can use them later. So for example, they have hundreds of collection campaigns that they have broken down by the sponsor of that specific event, also by the date and by the location. You can see here that just last fall, just fall of 2023, they were able to collect more than 5,000 photos and videos based on the way that they set up these collection campaigns. And another great example of volunteer stories that are collected really in a really great way comes from our friends at Wreaths Across America. So if you're not aware, Wreaths Across America, they actually host an annual wreath laying day, which is the second Saturday of December every single year. And these events take place at thousands of cemeteries across the nation. As you can see, that's actually a picture of my husband and I. We participated at our local cemetery here in Rochester, New York. But their key to content collection success is that they use multiple touch points. So you can see here, they collected just on the one wreath laying day from the one event, they collected from over 1,000 people, and they were able to get more than 8,000 pieces of content. I mean, that is an insane amount of content that you can use in so many ways for the rest of the year. But they really were able to do this because they let us as volunteers know up front that we were encouraged to take photos and videos. I think sometimes depending on a mission, maybe a mission like this, you might think as a volunteer that it might feel a little disrespectful to take a photo or a video, but they let us know ahead of time, we actually encourage it. We really want to hear from you. We really want to see what you've done. So I thought that was really great. And in addition to that, they didn't even just let us know ahead of time. They let us know that day and again after the event. We really want to see those photos and videos. So multiple touch points, that is definitely a key to success for them. Okay, ready to talk to my friend Leslie. She said, what is your best tip for getting volunteers to be willing to share stories publicly? Okay, so I have alluded to a few strategies at this point while I was sharing my examples, but here they are kind of more listed out for you. First, I recommend you generate a domino effect, and you're going to do that by having a place at your event or wherever your volunteers are together, and you're going to make it a really easy place that they can submit a video or a photo from in what you're looking for. So here's an example of my colleague Danielle. She is a big proponent of, instead of just having a traditional photo booth, let's set up a story booth. So let's have prompts, let's have things that people are ready to talk about, and let's get those on camera and let's record those for later. Because the thing is, when people see photos and videos being taken in real time, that is going to spark, oh, I need to go stop at that station and let them know as well what I'm thinking. But if you think that maybe having a content, or if you think that a domino effect might just be a little too challenging for your organization, we also would recommend designating a content collection champion. So that's somebody that is on your team or hopefully a volunteer that can be available at your event, specifically looking for videos and photos. So Wounded Warrior Homes, they actually had 2 content collection champions at their recent golf event. And because of that, they were able to collect 240 videos and photos at that event that day. And it was super incredible because the way that they had it set up, they had somebody at a hole, they also had somebody at the registration table. So you really got people at every single location. I would say that I do recommend for this strategy to have a volunteer set aside to do this. Maybe somebody who is a little more tech savvy, maybe somebody who is comfortable using their phone and is really just kind of understanding what you're looking for. I think that sometimes as nonprofits, we rely on staff members to organically collect photos and videos from events, but as we all probably know, we all are so busy at different events that stories can kind of fall to the wayside. But when you make a content collection champion, you can ensure that they will not. All right, I already shared with you some really great conversation starters for volunteer stories, but just to reiterate, when you ask a great question, that's really when you're going to get great stories. So instead of asking something that is very broad, like tell us your story, we recommend that you make a really nice targeted CTA, such as how has your life been impacted by volunteering with this organization? Or instead of saying, tell us about the volunteer work you do, which is a question that might elicit a nice answer, but it probably might sound a little more logistical, like I do this, I do this, I do this. Instead, you might want to find a way to make it a little bit more emotional. So your prompt could be, tell us about the first time you volunteered with us and how did it make you feel? And then finally, my biggest piece of advice when it comes to collecting stories is just don't be afraid to ask. I learned this very early on in my fundraising career, but people can't say yes if you never ask. So this photo comes with just a little story that I'd love to share with you, which is that this man photographed with me, he is a Vietnam Medal of Honor recipient. His name's Colonel Barney Barnum. He actually served as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy back in 2009. So this guy is, a national hero. And at the time, I was working at a nonprofit in Washington, D.C., and we really wanted him to come join us at an upcoming event. And I mean, I figured, well, it doesn't hurt to ask, right? The only thing he might say no, maybe he won't come, but you know what? He didn't. He said yes. He came to our event, and not only did he attend, he also told his story to everyone in the room, and he also made a donation. So that's just a really small story that kind of proves, sometimes you just have to not be afraid to ask. I think that really, in terms of story collection though, this makes sense in a way where you want to start thinking about how to create a culture of storytelling by asking more and more often. So every time that you're talking to your supporters, let's have it be a conversation. Some ways you can do that. You can conclude your monthly newsletter by asking for replies. You can end your social media post by asking for comments. You can there's really just several ways that you can make it a two-way conversation. And when you do that, you just never know what stories you might get in return. All right, I know I answered some questions. I know I threw a lot of information at you. I'm really looking forward to the Q&A. But before I hand it over to Jennifer, I do just want to say that we do recognize that it's not always easy to collect stories. It's not always easy to tell stories, especially when your mission has sensitive topics. It could be about sensitive topics. We did actually create the Ethical Storytelling Report to help give nonprofit professionals like you advice and strategies and insights about how to go about sensitive topics. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, highly recommend it. And I will make sure that this link is also in the follow-up email. But that is what I have for you today. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer. Take it away, Jennifer.
Jennifer, me, I assume, since we've got multiple Jennifers. Yes, I'm excited to hear all of this, Carly. It's going to be such a nice transition because I think we're going to talk about that next step of really sort of moving forward. And I am going to share my screen, and hopefully I will do this correctly so we can listen to my video. I'm going to select share sound. Let's see. So we're going to jump into sort of the stories that you tell to volunteers. And we're going to break this down in a little bit to those recruitment messages to invite volunteers in, or messages to maybe people who are not as familiar with your organization yet. And then we're going to also talk about those stories that we tell to volunteers that, or supporters that are already in our sort of circle of influence. The first thing I want to share, and if you've been with other trainings with me talking about storytelling, this is my favorite video from CASA. Oh. There we go.
I am for the child who has been abused, the child who is afraid to go home,
who thinks it's her fault, who is forced to keep a secret or else.
I am for the child who has been neglected,
the child who does not know where his next meal is coming from,
who must fend for herself and her little sister
alone.
The child who has never been to a doctor or a dentist.
I am for the child who was taken away
for her own protection,
the child who is now in foster care, who does not know how long he'll be there,
or who these people are, or if she should trust them. I am for her.
The child who is in his third,
fourth, fifth,
sixth foster home this year.
The child who has attended 4 schools in 2 years.
Who sits in back of yet another class surrounded by strangers.
Believing in his heart that no one
cares. I am for her. The child who has never been told
that he is loved.
That she is smart, beautiful,
talented,
worthy. That she is strong,
courageous.
That she is somebody. I am for her.
The child who one day will turn 18 and will be surrendered to the world.
I am for that child.
So I am there for that child.
To listen to her.
To speak for her.
To champion without compromise for what's in his best interest.
Because if I
am there for her, I know she will be half as likely to languish in foster care. And that much more likely to find a safe, permanent home.
She is the child I am for.
He is the child I am for.
They are the children I am for. She is the child I am for.
The child I am for is him.
Who am I?
Who am I?
Who am I?
I'm a CASA volunteer.
I am you.
So this is one of my favorites. I've seen this probably a dozen times or more, and it makes me feel emotional every time. I think it's such a good example of what a inspirational and educational story can do to recruit volunteers. This has that call to action of who am I am a volunteer, I am you. But we can also imagine a similar story as a recognition or sort of a end of the year celebration story where we really talk about how volunteers are making a direct impact on the lives of these kids. I really appreciate how it includes both that emotional piece as well as the quantitative information about the problem that these volunteers are solving, the situation that these kids are in, and how volunteers support them, as well as some of that qualitative information about what that volunteer is doing and how they're connecting with the children that they're working with. So when we think about why people volunteer with us, sometimes as leaders of volunteers or in organizations, we count things up, right? We count up the number of volunteers, we count up the number of hours. And there is a place, like we saw in that video, for quantitative information, but most people don't volunteer because they want to know how many hours they can spend with you. That's not their goal. They're coming with something that they want to change in their community. They want to find that cause they care about. These are our two top reported reasons for volunteering from the surveys that we do, that volunteers want to make a difference in their community and find that cause they care about. And when we just focus on numbers of volunteers or numbers of hours as a recognition story, that leaves out a lot of really good stuff. So when we think about telling our story to our volunteers, we want to find out what matters to our volunteers. And Carly mentioned some of the great ways that you can create opportunities for volunteers to tell their story to you. But I think there's even a way to get that started as that volunteer is coming into your organization, asking them what they want to accomplish with their volunteer time. Ask them what problem they see and how they want to make a difference. And when we do that as our volunteers are coming in, we have almost like a secret answer to give them after they've been volunteering with us. We can then tell them how they've made a difference, tell them why their work matters or what they've done to make that difference in their community. I really appreciate also, Carly, that you talked about that mission in the community, because that is so important. Oftentimes we can get bogged down in the how volunteers are working rather than the why volunteers are working in the community. So what are our values as an organization? What is our mission? When we think about how volunteers make that difference or support our mission, how are we telling that story? And are we involving our clients or our community in helping to tell that story to volunteers, especially if we have volunteers that are connecting one-on-one or doing client service. They want to know what difference they've made if they're not seeing that client on an ongoing basis, or if it's in a more of a community education role. What did people say about their experience or what they learned? So we can give that information back to the volunteers about how they've made that difference. And this is really one of my favorite questions to ask. What's different or better because of the work that volunteers do in your organization or in the community? And this really can this is a great way to start your recruitment messaging or your recruitment story, because again, people want to make a difference. They want to find that cause they care about. And when we think about what's different or better because of volunteers, we sort of can get away from some of those. Our volunteers show up on Wednesdays and they do this work and they support students. How do they support students? How are students' schoolwork better? How are they socializing better? Whatever that example is. And when we have volunteers that are working behind the scenes, we might have to work a little bit harder to create that story. But if you have somebody who is an organizational wizard, who's making everything run smoothly behind the scenes, that's a story that you can tell about how that helps those people doing direct service or your paid staff make the most of their time because you're well organized. So it's just a few things to sort of think about as we think about how we might share our story to prospective volunteers and to our existing volunteers. One of the things that I love is listening to how volunteers tell their story. And I loved some of Carly's prompts. I oftentimes ask, tell me the story of what you do here, as if you were talking to a friend or a family member. You're at a dinner party and somebody says, what have you been doing? And you say, oh, I'm volunteering with this organization. What do they say? How do they say it? What matters to them? So while we can gather that information from a prospective volunteer during an initial conversation, following up with our existing volunteers and having them share with us what matters the most to them, and then putting that into our recruitment message can be really powerful, because we might think we know what motivates volunteers, but you know who really knows what motivates volunteers? Our volunteers. They're experts at being volunteers in our organization. Again, can we, for our prospective volunteers, show what's different or better because of the people that volunteer with our organization? And I think that CASA video does a really good job of that. Now, that's obviously a very professional produced video. It doesn't have to be that shiny to get the message across. We're really thinking about what our volunteers tell us and how they make that difference, or how they change something for the better in the community. The other side of this is sort of what's in it for the volunteers. I think there used to be this idea that volunteering needed to be completely 100% altruistic. And that is kind of an old-fashioned idea. Our time is very valuable, especially now, especially post-COVID. I think people are really reflecting on what matters most to them. And it is okay to have either warm, fuzzy feelings, or to learn new skills, or to connect with people who care about the things that you care about. So that can also be really powerful information to share in a recruitment message. Many of you are probably familiar with Habitat for Humanity. There's a Habitat for Humanity in the Pacific Northwest that does a Women's Build Day, where they invite women to come together to be in a safer space, to use power tools, or to climb on ladders. And that can be a really powerful recruitment message for people who are looking for that kind of experience. I don't know if I fit in. I don't know if I can stand up with people who've been doing skilled trades for 20 years, but I want to try, and this feels like a safer environment. So when we explain what could be in it for our volunteers, we can also sort of create that connection. When we think about building those ongoing relationships, telling those recognition stories, I gave you that little hint of asking volunteers when they come in what matters to them, what they hope to get out of their volunteering experience. And I know sometimes you're thinking, Jennifer, I have hundreds or thousands of volunteers. How am I going to keep this all straight? But I guarantee you're going to find buckets. You're going to have 2 or 3 themes that run through these stories. So we want to make sure we remember what matters to our volunteers when it comes back to doing either our daily recognition or our seasonal celebrations. And we should be doing both. We shouldn't wait until April or December to say thank you to our volunteers. We should be weaving that into our daily or weekly sort of stories that we tell back to them. What did you accomplish? Who went above and beyond? What team really pulled together to get something done? As we think about these ongoing relationships with volunteers, we also want to make sure that we're arming them with information so that they can share their story with others, not just with us, which is ideal, of course, to have them tell their story to us, but we want them out there telling their story to friends and family members in the community. Word of mouth is one of the best ways to recruit volunteers too. So the more your volunteers are armed with their impact, with their reasons why, that we can then go out, they can then go out and spread that word and recruit other volunteers. And then that last piece, again, coming back to the mission, which I think is the most important piece of why we do the work we do. What's different or better? How can we make sure that volunteers coming into the organization know how their time will be spent and that it will be valuable to the organization and the community? And as we build those ongoing relationships with volunteers, how do we make sure that they know that their work is making a difference, especially when some of us have missions or cause areas that are so big, right? We're chipping away at big social issues. We want to make sure volunteers see that progress that they're making over time. All right, I know we have a lot of questions. I'm going to put my contact information up here. We'll also share these slides with the packet that's going out. And I'm always happy to answer questions or point people in the right direction, especially with regards to recruitment language. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both Carly and Jennifer, for all of that insight and information. That was amazing. I know I feel inspired already. And if I still worked in a nonprofit, I would want to take a hard look at both how I run my volunteers and prep them for engaging in storytelling, but also what questions am I asking them for their feedback to get those stories and those testimonials. So I love it. So much good advice. So with that, we're going to take a deep dive into some of the questions our attendees submitted during registration. This first question is for Carly, and it's in two parts. The first part comes from Alan, who asks, how long should a video of a volunteer testimonial be? And then there's a second part that fits really nicely, and this one's from Emily, who asks, what performs better, polished videos or authentic moments captured on video?
Ooh, okay, wow. Okay, two really good questions. All right, to address the first part from Alan, I think you said, I would say, okay, so how long should a video be? First, I would say when it comes to actually collecting the story from the volunteer, let it be as long as they are willing to tell you things. Let them continue to give more information, give more context, whatever they want to share with you. In terms of actually sharing the video, so that, you know, that's the difference between the input and the output, right? In terms of actually sharing the video, I would usually recommend, it really depends on where you're going to share it. I know that's like a little bit of a cop-out answer, but that is true because certain platforms will only allow you to go up to certain amounts. Other platforms make you go longer. So I usually like to tell people around a minute to 3 minutes is really where I would do a cutoff. And I really would just want to kind of turn the question around a little bit and say, how long are you willing to watch a video? If you don't think that it's if you're not personally willing to watch a video that's longer than 3 minutes, I wouldn't be putting out a video that's longer than 3 minutes. Okay. But in terms of polished videos versus authentic videos, I thought the video that Jennifer shared that was a polished video was beautiful. There is definitely a big reason to have a polished video like that. But if we're thinking about maybe nonprofits that don't have, you know, first of all, funding to help you make a polished video, I would please just let you all know that's okay, because honestly, authentic videos that are just a person talking to a camera that can tell that it's their real thoughts, their real stories, those are actually going to outperform those polished videos most of the time, especially on TikTok and on Instagram Reels. So I personally would love kind of a shorter, authentic video.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that advice. So our next question is from Kylie, and this is for Jennifer. Kylie would like to know, how do you make volunteers feel appreciated enough to keep coming back, especially with limited funding when you're working with that?
Yeah, I think I shared a little bit about really finding out what that volunteer wants to get out of that experience. The sort of traditional volunteer life cycle of recruitment, retention, recognition, in my mind, that's really about relationship building. It's about understanding what that volunteer wants to accomplish, how they can help, making sure they're getting that support, even to knowing who to go to if they have a question, and then making sure that if you can't give them that experience, that you're letting them know that as early as possible, making sure that you're getting on the same page and managing expectations. I think sometimes volunteers disappear because they don't feel like it was what they thought it was going to be, or they didn't feel supported or connected to the mission or the organization. I would say the number one trick maybe, and it's really just sort of closing that loop at the end of that first day. How did it go? Was it what you thought it was going to be? Was anything really challenging? What was your best part? You know, what was your favorite part? And then making sure that if it was challenging or if it wasn't meeting expectations, that you're either coaching that volunteer into another role, giving them additional support, or maybe managing them out to another organization, because not every volunteer is going to be the right fit for every organization.
That's some really good advice. And it also brought me back to something that you had mentioned too during your presentation about how you also want to make sure that you're continually like reaching out, checking in, not just twice a year, which I think sometimes, and from experience, you can't help but do that at a nonprofit, but I think that that's such good advice. You know, we talk about stewarding donors, and I think you brought up a really great point about stewarding your volunteers.
And if people want to know more about that, I didn't have space to put everything in my 15 minutes, but I have a nice recognition relationship building pyramid where we talk about what happens every day versus what happens once a year, and the way that other volunteers or other staff people can be involved in that daily recognition. It doesn't have to just be you. Little thank yous, little connections, celebrating small wins, all those things can make a big difference.
Yes, that would be excellent. I believe that there is a follow-up email going out after our event today. So if we are able to include that, we definitely will. So then let's turn to, our next question, which is for both of you. This is from Christine. She would like to know, most of my volunteers are very humble and don't want to be in the spotlight. Do you have any tips for encouraging volunteers to tell their stories? Jennifer, would you like to kick us off with this one?
Yeah, I think we want to make sure that we're obviously very thoughtful about whose face goes out there and who feels comfortable doing that. And that if a volunteer says no to being on camera, that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear their story, right? A lot of what I think what I talked about with how do we maybe create a composite person or an aggregate of what our volunteers say, and knowing that their feedback and their experience matters on an individual level, even if it never is for public consumption, I think is still super important. First of all, because we want to know if they're having a good experience. And second of all, if we hear more of those same kinds of things, we know we're sort of on that right track. I also think, and maybe Carly's going to talk about this, that having something like a narration over another video or narration over still photos might be a good way for those volunteers who maybe don't feel camera ready, but still have something inspiring to say.
Yes, I love that advice. Like, just because it's somebody else's story, even if they wrote it down, that could still be, you know, even if I say it, like physically say it, it doesn't mean that it's my story. That's still their story. I think that's such good advice. I would say a couple other things in terms of thinking about if they're saying, okay, so I'm like humble, I don't want to, you know, I don't know if I want to be in the spotlight. I would say maybe they're not sure what kind of new opportunities their story might bring. And maybe if we spend a little time educating them on maybe some of those stats, like I shared earlier, well, if you are able to share your story, if you would be so kind as to consider sharing your story, it would be so helpful in these ways. Or even just letting them know, this is the process of what happens after we record you. This is where we're planning to share the story. Really letting them in on the entire process and giving them kind of an overview of what it looks like from your perspective might make them feel like, oh, actually, my voice is important to this overall campaign, and maybe they'd be more likely to want to share.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think actually too, this kind of also touches on a question we saw coming from the chat from Larry. I think that they're kind of similarly related, who asked about an organization, particularly a medical nonprofit, trying to get videos or photos, especially when you have HIPAA considerations. So any kind of like piggyback advice you would like to share to address those concerns?
Ooh, sure. Yes, I know we have gotten this question in other webinars that we've held before. And we are big proponents of consent. The way that our platform works actually has a built-in consent form that people cannot even submit a story without first consenting to it. So I would say that if you have maybe a lawyer on your board or a lawyer on your staff or somebody that you can run that language by, make sure that that is consent that you feel like protects, you know, your storyteller, but also your organization. I think that when it comes to HIPAA, there's obviously so many things to consider there, but definitely prioritizing consent. And then I would say another which actually now that has me thinking we are doing a panel about consent in September. So I'll drop that link in a second, but if we are going to have a lawyer on the panel, and we're going to have a few other like experts that talk about consent. I personally am not one expert about consent, but we are actually holding an event about that because we get this question so often. But I would just say the final thing about what I would, how I would answer this question is that once you even have your story done, even if they have consented at the beginning, even if you have checked back in with them another time before it actually goes out, after you've done your editing and after you've done your, after your staff has like maybe looked through it, send it back to that person and just reaffirm that they still are okay with the way that they're being portrayed. Oh, and it looks like Natalie dropped that link for me. Thank you, Natalie.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalie. So then our next question, and Jennifer, I know you addressed this a little bit, but this question is a little bit more specific. And I think, I know I'm personally very excited to hear your advice on this one, is from Katie. And she would like to know, what are some tips on stories that will inspire the next generation of young volunteers?
Ooh, yeah. I think we did a survey in 2023 for volunteers at VolunteerMatch, and our younger volunteers under the age of 25, their sort of reason for volunteering is a little bit different. All of our older buckets wanted to use their caring skills to make a difference in their community. We saw those younger age ranges, sort of, you know, teenagers and young adults, really wanting to build and use professional or career skills. So while many of us focus on caring and our mission, when we're telling the story to younger volunteers, we want to make sure we're really thinking about the what's in it for them. What experience can they get? Maybe to point them in a right direction if they want to go towards healthcare or childcare, or maybe to give them that experience early on so that they realize, you know what, I thought I wanted to do this, but it turns out it's not actually what I want to do. The other thing to think about when we think about younger volunteers, because they haven't developed those skills yet, they haven't found out what they're good at, they haven't necessarily found their passion yet, is that we know that they are going to do a little bit more sampling. They may not want to do the same role week in, week out. So could they spend a couple days with your marketing team, a couple days with your field work team? Could they spend a couple days with your admin or exec team? That could be like a mini internship kind of volunteer experience where our younger volunteers are trying things out, learning lots of different skills. It will help them build that connection to your organization so that when they do know what they're great at, they might maybe want to come back and volunteer. But in the short term, you're really preparing them for being a lifelong volunteer as well as those life skills.
That is so interesting. I would have never thought of that, but it makes complete sense. Definitely.
Yeah.
I feel like
when you think about it, yeah.
Thanks for doing that research. That's like, like groundbreaking.
And so lastly, I think we have time for just one more question. This one is for both of you again, and it comes from Bonnie. Bonnie would like to know, what criteria do you use to pick volunteers to get stories from?
Would you like me to go first?
Sure. Yes, Carly,
Okay.
let's start with you.
Wow. Okay. Great question. Great question. Okay. So, I know, like, from my experience when I worked at the Breast Cancer Coalition, I had kind of a set of volunteers that helped me with like 3 different big events that I ran. So I had a group of volunteers that helped with our 5K walk run. I had a group of volunteers that helped with the golf tournament. I had a group of volunteers that helped with our gala. But even amongst those groups, there were certain ones that were really, really eager, really helpful all year round, not just when those events were coming around again. So I would say I would be, compelled to first ask them if they're interested in maybe sitting down for an interview, if they want to set some time aside to like deep dive some more about their experience. So I would say probably your most eager volunteers. Also, maybe your volunteers, like Jennifer was saying, that are interested in learning other aspects of your nonprofit. So even if they only usually volunteer for my 5K, maybe they are interested in also coming over to the golf tournament. So that's somebody that's looking for another way to give back. And your volunteers already are looking for big ways to give back, right? I mean, that's why they're volunteering for you. So definitely look for those really eager volunteers and just ask them. Like I said, don't be afraid to ask.
I think that's true. People won't tell their story unless you ask them. I always like an application/invitation strategy, both, right? So do you want to tell your story, either on camera or as a foundation to build a story that's, a composite of multiple volunteer stories, as well as that invitation, especially if I see a volunteer that sort of has some of that spark already. Maybe they are telling their friends and family, maybe they're the one who always brings an extra volunteer with them, that like, oh, hey, this is my cousin or my best friend or my cousin's best friend, and she's going to volunteer with me. Those people who are sort of naturally advocating for the work that we do, that have a good story that they tell sort of naturally. I think those are good places to start. As I said, like, open invitation, application for everyone, and then a targeted tapping on the shoulder of, I would love to have you tell your story. I think you do such a great job.
Oh yeah, and that's also just got me thinking, like, it is them sharing their story, but it's also like you are highlighting them. You're saying like, hey, let's talk about you. Let's talk about the work you're doing. Look at this impact you're making. I would love to share that with our audience. I'd love to share it with our social media channels. I think that's great. I love that process.
It's an amazing form of recognition too. Like, we don't just have to think about things that we pay for. I know that was the question about not a lot of budget. And I think actually things that you buy are not necessarily the most important things for volunteers. We can talk about I can also share a little bit about sort of the adaptation of love languages to appreciation in the workplace, which we can adapt for volunteers as well. But very rarely are people in it for things. They're in it for that connection, for words of affirmation, quality time, all those good things. So absolutely, being invited to represent the organization or tell their story is a huge appreciation, recognition strategy.
I love that. I thank you both so much. I thought that this was super educational, and actually I'm very jealous for everyone attending today. And I wish this had been around when I was working in nonprofits. So thank you both so much for sharing all of your insight today. And I think just before we wrap, we are going to see some demos from both MemoryFox and VolunteerMatch.
Yeah, I would love to. If anybody is interested in learning more about MemoryFox, I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully I share the right one this time. And I will tell you just a little bit about MemoryFox specifically. So, okay, I did share the right screen. All right, so I asked you at the beginning of our session, if someone asked, what is your mission, can you show them? And what I would like to now prompt you to say is, well, if the answer is no, then what exactly is stopping you? And we have found that when we talk to nonprofit professionals, they really have 4 different pain points. And 1 out of 4 tends to be something that they're experiencing. Number 1, collecting content from our community is like pulling teeth. Number 2, organizing content is frustrating and very time consuming. Number 3, we need a more efficient and modern way to share our story. Or number 4, I struggle with collecting community stories ethically. So actually here at MemoryFox, we built a platform that addresses all 4 of those pain points head on. We have a 3-step process, which is collect, organize, and share. And one thing that we always want to recognize is that we do know that nonprofits have been given an impossible task of competing in the attention economy while also remaining true to ethical standards for authenticity in storytelling. So these are things that big for-profit brands actually don't have to worry about as much as nonprofits. I feel you there. And we actually found that in the ethical storytelling report, again, I hope you all will give it a minute to check it out, but we found that 58% of nonprofit professionals actually also feel that way. They feel that they are struggling to collect stories from their community while doing no harm. So to get back to those first 3 pain points, step 1, of our collection process, we actually have a tool where you build your own campaigns, you distribute it directly to your community, and all they need to do is simply click the link, and then they could submit their photos, videos, and their written testimonials. That's actually an example campaign right here. If anybody wants to scan it, you can take a look and see how it works from the storyteller perspective. But what is really cool about the collection tool is that there's no download or login required. Like I mentioned earlier, we do capture the consent and we manage the consent for you, as well as you're able to redirect back to your website. So people won't even know they're on MemoryFox. They're just going to say, oh, I'm just talking to Kids Help Connections. In terms of organizing, after the community submits their photos, videos, written testimonials to you, it's going to populate in your story bank. So you are going to stay organized, which is, for me, probably the biggest pain point I used to have. So we have all these tools built in where you can tag your content, you can bulk upload, and you can enjoy unlimited storage. Finally, from the share side, we actually we have several ways that you can actually take that content and share it out, because obviously you need to actually share it with people, right? Or else what's the point? So we have several tools that you can use to create collateral, to create social media posts, or generate reports. So we have our built-in video editor. We also have a story builder, which helps you create a shareable web page of many stories. You also at any time can always download the high quality original, and we are integrated with Canva. So any story that you get from a community member automatically will go to your Canva account. And I hope you all are using Canva because it is free for nonprofits, the pro version, which is, really the best version. And then just to talk a little bit about the ethical storytelling features that we have for MemoryFox, like I said, we do have, we are considered the #1 ethical storytelling tool for nonprofits. We do that because of the following features. We provide equitable pricing, which is really just because we believe every nonprofit has great stories to tell. So we find a price that works for you. I've already mentioned the consent. It does have a built-in editable form as well as a removal option. In terms of privacy, MemoryFox never owns your content. That is all yours. Accessibility, the way that MemoryFox works, you are able to get it on your phone, on your desktop, wherever your community feels most comfortable. And also everything is fully customizable. So when you have all of your strength-based language that your community prefers, you can go ahead and put that into your prompts, into your introduction screen. That way people know that this is you and this is the way that they like to be referred to. So that is just a really quick overview of MemoryFox. If you want to learn more from one of our expert storytellers, go ahead and scan that QR code and set up a demo. Okay, now I'm passing it back over to Jennifer at VolunteerMatch.
Perfect. So I wanted to just start off with our getting started page for recruiting volunteers. I think there we go. And I also dropped this link into the chat as well as the link to the Learning Center. So if you're already using VolunteerMatch, I would point you to our Learning Center to find out what kinds of tools and training and support you might need to get started, either recruiting volunteers or to help you better recruit volunteers. If you've been following along and you're on our newsletter, you know we've been launching some new tools and we've got more coming up this month and next month to help you better recruit volunteers most effectively and efficiently. If you haven't started on VolunteerMatch, I'm going to point you to this page that will help you get set up. So we do work with not just nonprofit organizations, but a few for-profit organizations as well, like hospitals or hospices. So this gives you a bit of information about what you need to get started. And we do always have a basic account that's free, so no fees to post opportunities and recruit volunteers. If you are looking for a little bit more information about how to best use VolunteerMatch, we do have Pro membership, which gives you some additional tools, a little bit more reach, ease of use to get going and get started, and that is also available. So I'm always happy to answer questions. We're pretty easy to get set up on. Again, just follow that link. And if you want to learn more, again, Learning Center for those of you already using VolunteerMatch, and the Recruit Volunteers page if you'd like to get started.
And I'll just say, as a volunteer, I get my VolunteerMatch emails, and I'm always seeing new opportunities in my area. So I love it. I think VolunteerMatch is really great.
It's really amazing to see all the creative opportunities that people are recruiting for, and then to see that right person find that connection. You would think like no one will be able to have this skill set and this passion, but I'm always amazed at these really cool connections that we see on VolunteerMatch between volunteers and organizations.
That's awesome. And it kind of goes back to what Carly had mentioned in her presentation. You never know unless you ask.
It's true.
And so with that today, I want to first say thank you both so much for joining us today. This session was incredibly insightful and, like I said, educational. And thank you so much to our attendees. I hope you guys have some really great tips and tricks up your sleeve now to, one, getting more volunteers, but also collecting some really meaningful stories from them as well. And with that, we are going to send up a follow-up email, and I know that we'll have chock full of information and maybe even some contact information if anybody has further questions. Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, thank you everybody for being here today.
Thank you guys. Thanks, MemoryFox. This has been really great.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.